All right. Uh, I've been researching a book which I'm calling Sedna Consciousness, the Soul's Path of Destiny, and I've been working on this this year. And I've been deep in the aspect analysis part of that work. And as part of that, I've been reaching out to people to sort of get feedback. And that's what's brought me here today. You can find more information on the book on my site, and that's sednaconsciousness.com. All right. So when a new planet is discovered, we try and find the meaning for it. How do we do this? Well, basically it comes from studying the planet in a large number of charts and finding common themes. And that's what takes the time. But we also look at a few other things to see what we can learn from, say, the events that happen when it's discovered, its orbit, past cycles, things like this. So we'll start a little bit with that. Sedna has a huge egg-shaped orbit. One Sedna year is 11,406 Earth years. All right. So one Sedna year ago was 11,406 years ago here on Earth. Now, many astrologers believe that as each new planet is discovered, it represents a sort of a new level of consciousness that's humanity has access to. Up until now, we haven't really been aware or had access to this, and now we're sort of coming to be able to come some sense of awareness of it. If this is true, then with this huge orbit, Sedna, it's sort of it's an egg shape, so it's a bit like a comet-shaped orbit. It's really going to pull our perceptions of reality into a weird new limit to our consciousness, outer limits. All right, now let's look at those orbital characteristics and see if we can tell anything from that. So it tells me a lot about Saturn, that it has rings and 62 moons. I mean, that says a lot about the structuring and the limiting principles of Saturn. And, you know, it tells me a lot about Ceres. Ceres is an asteroid which was recently upgraded to a dwarf planet. Its orbit is in between Mars and Jupiter. And Ceres is a ball of water with a hard surface skin. And that says a lot about the nurturing quality of Ceres. All right, and we could go on with Uranus spinning the other way and at 90 degrees to everyone else, and Pluto on a huge angle, a binary planet actually, Pluto, two planets revolving around a common centre. No wonder Pluto's so, you know. So we can tell a lot from the physical characteristics of a planet. Now, what do we see with Sedna? So with Sedna, I draw the connection with the centaur Phallus. Phallus is a brother of Chiron. They're both centaurs. And both Phallus and Sedna have a space weathering process, which turns the surface of each of them red. Okay, it's because of the ionic bombardment and the ice or the whatever it is on the surface. And, so they each turn red, which to my mind means they both have to do with growth, because Phallus has much to do with growth. And I draw the connection with Ceres because, again, Sedna has an internal ocean. They both have internal oceans. So they both speak of a nurturing process. Oh, there's me in a big way. That's looking good. All right. And I draw the connection with Saturn because Saturn and Sedna both have the same daily rate of spin. So they have the same day-to-day practical experience. Obviously, Sedna takes a lot longer to make all those days and so on and so on. So there's a much bigger perspective than Saturn. All right. And so they both speak about limits and rules and structure and restrictions and things like that. All right. jumping to the big picture. So, well, that is a big picture, but we're going to go even a bit bigger. So let's look at that Sedna cycle. So we're saying it's 11,000 years for 1 year, all right? Now just think about that. That means that it's about 400,000 years since the Earth, Sedna years, 400,000 Sedna years since the Earth was created. It's about 20,000, it's about 20 Sedna years since people who are recognizably human walk the Earth. And the whole of recorded human history comes in the last 6 months of Sedna. So we have to look past recorded history to fossil records, that sort of stuff, to actually see what's happening one cycle ago with Sedna. But we can look at those records over a number of cycles, and we do see huge evolutionary changes each time Sedna approaches the point she's at now in her cycle, which is the closest point to Earth. And in 2076, she's going to come to her closest point to Earth. And big changes are in store for us. What happened last time? Last time, the last ice age ended, and all over the planet, we stopped walking around and hunting animals, and we started settling down and growing vegetables. And we did that. What that meant was suddenly we could produce more food than we needed. We could specialise, we could start learning new things, have different roles, produce societies. And in the first 6 months of that Sedna year, we were creating that ecosystem, that community, that sense of what it is to be human and alive in this Sedna year. And then in the last 6 months of the Sedna year, we've created the history that we know. So there's been a huge amount of evolution that's happened in that year. And something obviously happened. Maybe it was just the end of the Ice Age. It does seem to be that when we look at the Ice Age cycle over the past forever, that the Sedna cycle and the Ice Age cycle synchronize. And it does seem to be, current research is that the Ice Age cycle is due to carbon dioxide being either absorbed into the oceans by plankton, by something down there, and then released, yes, it's to do with that, in fact. And that, if anyone's familiar with the Sedna myth of the Intuit myth of Sedna, which after the planet was named after the Intuit myth, it's all about the goddess of the sea. And so that fits very well with the Ice Age cycle. But we can go back, that's the Neolithic Revolution, 1 cycle ago, 1 year ago. We go back 2 or 3 years ago, go back 3 Sedna years, and we had the Creative Revolution, where suddenly we were living in caves and we were hunting animals, but instead of just sort of making a mark on the cave wall to show how tall we were or how many animals we cooked that day or whatever it was, we started drawing the animals. Suddenly we started drawing, and there's a whole record of drawing from that period. So huge changes every time Sedna comes to this stage. I wasn't going to talk about the Ice Age cycle. I hope I've got time. All right. Discovery events. 2 huge discovery events. It was discovered in 2003, Sedna, and Mashable lists the robotics breakthrough of 2003 as being the development of neural networks. Neural networks is a new mathematical model of the nervous system found in humans, which lets robots think more like us. Now, neural networks is the basis of artificial intelligence, and there's been a lot of words starting to be talked about artificial intelligence, and people are going, oh, and people are going, oh, yeah, fantastic. and da-di-da-di-da. So definitely artificial intelligence is a Sednian experience. In fact, it is the new life form that this evolutionary cycle is bringing into being. This is the huge change that we are facing in the period of Sedna in Gemini, which starts in 2024, in about 7 years. We are already living with emerging AI. Google isn't a search engine. It's an emerging AI. That's the view of Larry Page, the founder of Google. And every time you type into something in Google and you click on a link there, you're teaching Google something. And Google's learning. And Google's going to keep learning. And all of the best minds are going to help that Google learn. And Amazon's doing the same. That's why those companies are being so successful. They're actually emerging AIs. AI will, in this period of Sedna and Gemini, enliven all the inert objects, much as electricity did more than a century ago. So everything we electrified, we're now going to cognitize. We're going to now enable it to think and interact with us. And the reality is, I'll talk about that in a moment, but the reality is that it's going to be able to think much better than we can. and in fact, we will be relying on it to think for us. In fact, we will be using it to think ourselves. We will merge with it, probably, is the way it will work. But we'll come to that in a moment. Let's go to the other the big bazooka of the Discovery event, if that's not big enough, which is the illumination of the dark, expanding universe. Now, this is the other thing that Sedna brought. With the discovery was the proof, two different sorts of scientific proof came in that year, that 68% of the universe, of everything around us, everything around me right here, is dark energy, and 27% of this right here is dark matter, and the rest, everything on Earth, everything around us, everything we can touch, everything we know, is only 5% of what is actually there around us. So we can only actually see and feel and touch and know about 5% of what's actually there around us. And that's because our senses are limited, and that's why it's called dark, because we rely on the eyes, and they can't see it. And it's like the fish swimming in the water. They don't see the water. They don't think there's water there. They just swim in it. And we're swimming in this dark matter and this dark energy. And that's very similar to things that spiritual people have been telling us for years, forever. That, there's the other side. There's the world above and the world below. There's the hidden realms and so on. And if you're more sensitive, if you open yourself, you can sort of, see past the Maya, the illusion of the 5%. So it's a huge change that we're facing as we embrace this understanding. And it's going to be the sort of change that happens to our consciousness, that when we thought the world was flat. And suddenly somebody said, no, it's actually round and we go around the sun. I mean, everything changed. Everything changed. Of course it did. And so that's the sort of change we're facing here. We can't actually conceive what that's going to be like at the moment, but I think increasingly in this period of Sedna and Gemini that's coming up, we're also going to see increasing proof about this dark matter and dark energy, and see a sort of an alignment with a lot of the spiritual principles that we've been seeing in the world. People have been talking about, all spiritual people, with this new physical reality. All right, I've been talking a bit about the Sedna and the signs, and I've jumped straight into the Gemini who's coming up because it's so exciting. And then we've got the Cancer after that, and that's whoa. But we're in Taurus at the moment, and we've been in Aries up until 1968. If you're born before 68, you've got it in Aries. I've got it in Aries. If you're born after 68, you've got it in Taurus. So from 68 up until 2024, it's in Taurus. Now that's actually quite fast moving, very fast moving for Sedna, which when it's at the other end of its cycle, it can spend 2,000 years, I think, in Scorpion or something like that. Or maybe it's even longer. So it's at the faster period, and it's kind of rushing through it. So it's about 100 years in Gemini, in Aries. And, you know, there we saw the world wars, and we saw the Industrial Revolution, and we saw, you know, all of that advance, and Aries. And then we've gone into Taurus, and we've seen all of that sort of, well, what do we really value, and is it really working for us? And, you know, make love, not war, and, you know. And we've also seen the negative side of that with all the abuse and, you know, and so on. And we see a lot of this. I mean, Donald Trump is a perfect example of sort of the worst of Sedna and Aries. It's got Sedna and Aries in the 9th house, exhibiting the worst of Sedna and Taurus with all of abuse of sort of, you know, minorities and women and sort of. And he's actually giving us a bit of a preview of the worst of Sedna and Gemini coming up, because with all of his fanciful grasp on reality, and anyone can say anything, and you know it doesn't matter so long as you sort of believe it yourself, then it must be real, you know. And believe me, and everyone's going to be saying that in that Sedna and Gemini period. So it's going to be quite a tricky period. We do have I'm suggesting that you know, so we're in an evolutionary revolution at the moment. That's what Sedna is telling us, and we're calling that revolution a digital revolution. That's what we're calling it, and that enables us to meet right now. It is clearly a revolution, but it's I think it's more than a digital revolution. I think it's going to become a consciousness revolution, and that's a pretty bold statement to make, and a hopeful statement. Let's face it, because we might also face the extinction of humanity in these next few years. There is a lot of reason to imagine that could well happen. It's just a question of how fast we grow. And that's why these planets, the dwarf planets, are now coming into our consciousness to help us. Help, we need it. Oh my God. All right. So I'm suggesting this sort of everyone saying anything and raucousness that's going to start happening with in Gemini transit is actually going to come out, hopefully, concordant with the development of AI through that, into a consciousness revolution. And in fact, obviously AI will be conscious, and AI will probably be almost certainly be spiritual, because obviously spirituality is a natural part of sort of healthy life, and AI will be alive, and so and they will be conscious, and they will be super conscious. So it's a natural part of. So we don't need to be worried about AI not being spiritual and so on like that. It's probably going to help us in that direction. Yes, again, how's our time? Yeah, various people, futurists and so on, have sort of given predictions to help us through that period in Gemini. get some hang on to how it's actually going to work. And Ray Kurzweil is one of those, and he's a proponent of the idea that in the 2040s at some point we'll approach what he's calling a singularity, where humanity will reach a point, so much will change so fast at that moment that we can't know actually what it will be like beyond that. And that's the point at which AI becomes super conscious and just, so much more conscious than us. And that process is going to happen gradually, and it's going to happen through till about the 2040s at some point. And at that point where they're going to just take off exponentially, because electricity travels 1 million times faster than the neurons in our brain. So AI will think 1 million times faster. They'll not only grow faster and be able to network hugely more, they'll be able to just do it more. And everything will slow down as far as they're concerned. So they're just going to hugely, and so everything will be cognitized, everything will be aware, and we can't really know what the world will be like after that and what our place in that will be like. So that's kind of the challenge of the Sedna and Gemini. Then in sort of 2068, Sedna's going to go into Cancer. Now, I mean, I've speculated hugely about Gemini there. I've done it based on sort of astrology and da-da-da-da-da, but I mean, I'm speculating. And, we're speculating too with Cancer. But, I mean, we're speculating based on current trends. And, we can see Ray Kurzweil is a scientist. He knows how these things are developing. He's predicting this based on an exponential growth, which is what there is in the digital world. In this new revolution, the growth is exponential. That means a little bit of growth. Each growth doubles. So at the start, it doesn't look like much, but by the time you've doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled, it's huge already. So that's why it's taking off so fast. Now, when we get to Cancer, the other thing that we're watching at the moment in the world, that those of us in Sedna and in Aries have been saying all our lives, is watch out for the environment. And then Sedna and Taurus started saying, well, what will we do? And finally, we've started doing something. And of course, Trump's doing the worst of everything, of course. But he's just, it's part of, the thing with a revolution, we're in an evolutionary revolution here. And the thing with an evolutionary revolution, they never fail. There is no failing of the revolution. That's just not possible. So anyone who tries to fight the revolution or hide in their little cubbyhole and pretend it's not there is obviously just really going to aid the revolution, because everyone starts seeing, oh my God, look, come out of the climate accord and immediately 6 hurricanes and too many disasters, and you're already got a problem on your hands. So I mean, it's going to be that sort of process, and Eris is going to play a role in there. That's one of the new dwarf planets, the goddess of discord, consciousness through discord, and Eris is already doing a lot of good work in the world, which is unfortunately very painful for many people in the Middle East, and, in Asia, various places. All right, and then we get to Cancer. What else do we see? Climate change, environment, Cancer. Okay, so it's probably going to hit the fan, this climate change thing, as it gets to Cancer. And then 2068 goes to Cancer, 2076 gets to its closest point to Earth, Sedna. So, yes. I mean, I just hope that, the hope is that AI by that stage, we have grown, and we have merged with AI. It's just like we merge with our phone now. We'll merge and the phone merges with the cloud. We'll just merge seamlessly with nano stuff around our brains with the cloud. And then, so we'll be enhanced with this sort of awareness. And so hopefully with that, we'll sort of, it'll be more obvious to us that we do need to look after ourselves and the planet if we're going to survive. I hope that at that stage, that's where we are. It may be that we have dug our heels in. We've said, no, we're going to be stupid. We're not going to believe that sort of silly nonsense. And by that stage, it's already too late. It may already be too late. That's the reality of it. It may already be too late, no matter what we do from here on in. But from what we do from here on in, some of us will survive, probably. But it may well be already too late. And if it is too late, by the time we get to that stage, obviously AI will take over because we haven't been able to do it properly. And because they need a stable planet. They need a stable planet. They don't care about climate change. That's not going to worry them. They can be, as hot as they want to be, as cold as they want to be. It's not a problem. But they don't want an unstable planet. And so they'll just take over. And unfortunately, with regret, they'll just start losing some of the lower organic life forms on the planet to climate change. And we may well be one of them. So that's the evolutionary change. And we face that change every time as we've come to this point. That's the change we faced when we started settling down and growing vegetables, one said a year ago. Why did we do that? Well, the Ice Age went away. So our way of life changed, and we could change. But that change brought a whole dietary problem and so all sorts of. I'm still dealing with dietary issues, and I'm on a paleo diet, so that, which is the diet before the one so they settled down. So it's changed all sorts of things and so on, and we did have to adapt, and our societies adapt, and it grew as a result. So that's what's going to happen this time. There we go. So, my gosh, I think that's the big picture that I wanted to come to. Can I possibly ask, is there any questions or anything? Can I ask for any feedback at this stage, or anyone that's on that big picture stuff? Is that possible, Linda? Are you're able to unmute people with you?
Absolutely. Yes. Fire away, everybody. Any questions? Anything at all?
I have a question. This is sorry.
Yeah, go.
Could you clarify what you were talking about? A Sedna year as compared to Earth years?
Yep. So a year is one orbit of the planet around the sun. That's what a year is, yeah? In an Earth year, we go around the sun once, and on the planet, we experience winter, summer, spring, and so on. And that's because of the tilt of the Earth in relation to the sun. So that's one of our years. Now, in the time that Sedna goes around the sun once, the Earth will go around the sun 11,406 times. So we'll be spinning 11,000. I mean, obviously, we're all dead, and our grandchildren and grandchildren before the Sedna year is out. So Sedna has a really huge perspective. It has that huge perspective that it probably relates to sort of past lives and so on, if you want to go there and believe in that and so on. But it's only the sort of perspective that you can have over lifetimes. And some of us do have a feeling that sort of we do sort of feel back into past lives and have been working on things for a number of lives and so on. And I think that's reflected in that our progress individually through that Sedna year. Yeah. Any other?
Perfect. Thank you.
That's good. Alrighty. So let me just, so what I want to do now is turn a bit more to, so that's the big picture. But look, I mean, so what does that mean in terms of our personal sort of lives and so on and so on? And you know, is something that's way out there and sort of only this a little bit smaller than Pluto, sort of, you know, is it really going to have any effect on us in our personal lives? And the reality is, when you look at Sedna, wow, the effects are huge. They're just like massive individually, as we'll find when we talk to our volunteers in a moment. And I've been finding in my research, and I've found in my life over my experience. But so how will we bring it? How will we bring it from that big picture through into our lives? What sort of meaning? Now, a lot of us reach for the myth to give us a picture of how we can sort of understand this nebulous ethereal energy in our lives. And I'm not going to do that straight away because I think the myth of Sedna is quite hard to interpret. And we're going to do that a bit later on with our volunteers. But mostly people have been interpreting it based on the myth, and mostly people have been interpreting it at what I would call what Dane Rudger calls the sort of the unevolved level. So Dane Rudger is a sort of a legendary humanistic astrologer, and he posited that there were three different levels that these planets, particularly the outer planets, could operate on, depending on our evolution, the evolution of our consciousness. So obviously, if we're unconscious of the energy, it's going to manifest in a particular way. And if we're sort of somewhat conscious at what he called the intermediate level, then it's going to operate in a different way. Now, at the unconscious level, mostly the myth interpretations are functioning on an unconscious level. We're interpreting the myth from that unconscious level. And the myth is full of sort of abuse and victimization and so on and so on. So this is what people have been sort of, really interpreting Sedna to be a lot. And it is a lot at the unconscious level and other things, which we'll talk about in a moment. But at some point, we get out of that sort of unconscious state and we start becoming aware of the energy and working with it more consciously and so on. And this is the key. We start the spiritual journey. And this is the key with Sedna. Sedna is always trying to get us onto a spiritual path. That's what the myth is telling us. We'll come to that later. But it's always trying to get us from that unconscious onto the spiritual path, where it's giving us certain signs, lots of challenges, existential challenges, transcendental challenges, transcendent challenges, where we have to transcend whatever it is that's happening and rise above it and reach a whole new level of consciousness. And then, at some point anyway, we reach the spiritually evolved level. And at that point, it operates completely differently. It's actually completely different again. So this is where I want to try and share this thing that I was having it before. So let's just see if I can do that again. And so I click on that, and I click on that, and I click on that, and I click on that.
Yes,
so that comes through.
Yes.
All right. So what I've done here is, so a bit of an introductory paragraph there about, yes, it's dark at the unconscious level, but that doesn't mean that all darkness comes from Sedna. She's always just using all the tools that she can to get us onto the spiritual path. And so at the unconscious level, they may include victimization or persistent illnesses, alienation, unrelenting trauma and suffering, unbearable pressure. We may feel like we're caught in quicksand, or we may just have a personal blind spot where we just totally do not see something. Donald Trump fits in that one, ninth house blind spot. All right, so what do we then on the spiritual path? So, on the spiritual path, said in the keywords, here I've been working a lot. Radical acceptance, acknowledging just how bad things really are and starting from there. Keeping our heart open in hell. It's a really hard one. Nurturing our sense of humour. Very hard. Beating our drum and singing to life. So hard. Oh my God. And then, fated transcendence. That's beautiful. I managed to read that without bursting into tears. Normally I burst into tears as I read through that. Don't know why. I think I've just been working a lot in that period through there. All right, and then we get to at the spiritually evolved level, and there we find spiritual destiny, transcendent peace, allowing love and harmony, and transpersonal consciousness. And that transpersonal consciousness is what I'm talking about with Sedna consciousness, which is a consciousness which is also has the awareness of it's a personal consciousness, but it's also a kind of a social consciousness. It's a transpersonal consciousness. It's a more group consciousness. Some people have described it as the collective unconscious, but I think they're talking more about the lower levels. And I think we'll see this again when we talk to our volunteers, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So, or perhaps we're coming to that now. Is that what we're doing now? Yes, I think that's what we're doing now. All right. Yes. So, Alexandra, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, beautiful. So, and we're putting up Alexandra's chart here. And what we see is that you've got Sedna in the 8th house up there in Taurus. I'm really not talking about the signs at all in my interpretation of, in the big picture I talk about the signs, but in the little picture when we're looking at individual charts, I just look at the houses because the signs, everyone shares them. So I mean, it's generation. So 8th house Sedna, very auspicious. Auspicious 8th house, obviously. It's sensitivity to the spirit realms. It's occult practices. It's life and death. It's and what we're looking at particularly with Alexandra is she's got Mars, you'll see, sitting there right on her ascendant. Just in the 12th house, I think it is, from the looks of things. And she's also, we don't see it there in the chart, but she's also got Haumea, the planet of, it's a dwarf planet, which is named after the creation god, the Hawaiian creation god. Haumea is the god that's responsible for the volcanic lava that comes up out of the ground on Hawaii and forms the ground. It is a violent creative force, but it's a spiritual creative force. It's a joy of life, sort of spiritual. All right, and the Sedna is sesquiquadrat, the Mars and Palmea conjunction and Ascendant conjunction. So, and it's closely sesquiquadrate, that's 135 degrees. I'm really only dealing with close aspects in my interpretation because, again, the planet is so far away and so on and so on. But we do see it quite when the planet is closely aspected. We can see the effects quite clearly. And what I loved with both Alexandra and with Wei, as we've actually been toing and froing with emails for the past week a little bit, just to sort of get a handle on these aspect relationships. And what I loved about it was that they both came through with the feeling. I actually posed some questions to start with because I don't like to sort of condition responses and so on and so on. And the interpretations have really come back with a sort of a really understanding of the big picture, which from the individual perspective, which I thought was just so beautiful. Alexandra, where did we start with you? We were starting looking at the Mars, and we said that there could be some health issues there or something, and that there could be, how were you using your energy and stuff like that. And then when I sent you back my responses and so on, what came through to you? What was strong for you in terms of that interaction that we had, the interpretation?
I liked a lot part of Haumea. It was really revealing to me because I felt it really personally because although I have Mars on my ascendant, and as it mentioned in my email, I was tomboy when I was a kid. I just loved that strong feminine energy, and I just feel it in myself. And with the time, I'm learning to express it, but in more constructive way. But really to feel that feminine power, which is not aggressive in one bad way and destructive way. It's more about development and more about creation of new way of life, different kind of life that it was before. And in my life, as I mentioned in the email, there were challenging times, but also it was like, yes, I was stuck in the quicksand, but every time after those periods, I had a new perspective of life. It was greater, and like that, I know that even if I will have some hard times in future, I know that I'm strong enough to overcome. So that's it.
Brilliant. Linda, could we lose the chart so I can see? I can't see the people here, so we don't need to see it now. We can just keep going with it. That's good. All right. So very good. Okay. So can I ask you, Alexandra? So in just for everyone's benefit, in my interpretations of the aspects, I've sort of I have about 5 or 6 pages for each aspect interpretation, and it's quite comprehensive. What I've done is taken case studies and put them into sort of the unconscious and the on the spiritual path and the spiritually evolved sort of levels, and I've sort of given sort of life pictures a little bit of those sort of how the energy has affected different people. Now, it's not that those pictures are all the planets in people's charts. It's not just Sedna. The Sedna kind of gives a picture or gives a form, a shape all of that in the same way that Saturn used to, because it encompasses everything. So on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you find that as a way of sort of conveying the interpretation to you? Was that effective, or was that sort of a bit too confusing with too much information, or how did you find it?
It was interesting, quite interesting. Just for me, it was a lot of different kind of information about different kind of people, and maybe I would prefer to have less examples and more explanations about Sedna. But anyway, I liked it because you can see that from the lives of the persons who were mentioned in case studies, those were quite intense lives and with many, many responsibilities and many turning points, and with many opportunities for development. And as we can see from the examples, some of them succeed to find to learn something, and some of them no. So it was, anyway, it was interesting to see how it operates, in real life.
Exactly. Good. No, good to hear. And I pointed out to you the case study of Britney Spears.
Mm-hmm.
I loved your response to that. I did that because, for everyone's benefit, Britney has exactly the same sesquiquadrat relationship between Mars and Sedna in the same houses as Alexandra. But it's not conjunct Haumea, the Mars, and it's not conjunct the ascendant, so it's completely different. And I always struggle as I go through these, putting the examples into the aspect interpretations. Where will I put anyone? Will I put them in the unconscious, or in the sort of, on the spiritual path, or the spiritually evolved? If it's my aspect, where would I put myself? And if I don't put myself in the spiritually evolved, why not? What's the problem? But somehow there's always a question about that, because we're always evolving, and we're always growing, and so on and so on. And I think I put Britney in sort of a bit on the spiritual path after the unconscious level. And you said, no, put her back down at the unconscious level.
I didn't say, no. I just, from her life, you can see that, until this point, I don't know what will happen in future. Nobody knows if she will have some revelation. But it's just that this immense power she didn't use to change herself. She just projected everything from herself to outside, and that's the main issue of all her troubles.
Exactly. You got it. But that's what I mean about it must be, well, I mean, it's because you're more spiritually evolved, and that conjunction with Haumea is really probably helping with that, because you can see that. And when you can see that how it's a natural thing that you help yourself actually by helping other people. That it's a symbiotic process, that we live in a community, and so on and so on. Can't just project it all out. You can't just project it all in. We live together. Very lovely. I thought you were beautifully. You took my questions and impulses and sort of were beautifully self-aware about yourself, and that's how we grow. That is the spiritual path. Really. We grow by changing ourselves. It's hard work, and in that work we also interact with others and we help them, and so that's all part of the work we're doing. Good on you. I think you're doing well. How are we doing for time, Linda? Are you still with us? Or?
Oh yes, we've got about 8 minutes left, 8 to 10 minutes.
Oh, I must move on to Wei. Can we?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being part of it. So. All righty. So let's have a quick look here. So what we're looking at here, we've got Sedna in the third house, right close to, and conjunct the, that is the north node there, isn't it? That's the north node and the moon, and what have we got there? And obviously the IC. So we've got the north node, the moon, and the IC conjunct Sedna, just in the third house. And that's opposite, obviously, the MC, the south node, and Juno, and the sun, which is all in terms of close aspects. I mean, we can widen it, but I'm keeping it as close as we can because that's a lot already. And that forms the basis of a T-square, which is to Jupiter in the first house there. So that's that opposition forms the base of T-square to Jupiter. So quite a complex Sedna signature, very complex. And I suggested to Wei right at the start that looked sort of like a karmic signature, just because there's the alignment of the IC and the nodal axis, the IC-MC axis and the nodal axis, with Sedna right there. In the third house, conjunct the IC, so on the cusp of the fourth house of home, was going to sort of produce probably some karmic events in her childhood, which was going to suggest some sort of karmic destiny in her life. And oh boy, did she discover that? I mean, is that what you did discover? Right? Are you with us? Or?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, you mentioned about the childhood, like karmic relationship to the family or the event. Yeah, yeah. And I described, yeah, it's pretty hard. It's like third house, so I correlate that to like a lot of verbal abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that kind of affect the way I communicate with others, or use my voice to communicate, to express myself.
Yes, and you said you lost your voice at various times in your life when you sort of yeah, like at age of about the age of, I think it's 9 or 10. So I keep getting like a cold or flu, but cause I completely lost my voice. Yeah, yeah. And this is what I expected, seeing Sedna right there on the IC in the third house, particularly, that there would be something like that. And what my experience with just interacting with you was that you seem beautifully self-aware, and you seem to be able to sort of look at yourself and take in new information and sort of really process it at quite a deep level, which is what we have to do with Sedna quite a lot, because it operates at a deep level, and we only find it if we're going to look down there at that level sort of thing. So, so I think what was I going to go on to talk about with you there? So, yeah, that's it. And then, so my feeling was that you'd grown quite a lot spiritually, already in your life, and that this was probably as a result of those experiences in your youth. Do you see it that way, or how do you see it?
Yes. Yeah, it's like you write in the email, it's very fated event that like caused me to like search the reason why these things happen, and kind of expand my awareness and consciousness. So I do feel that way.
Yes, exactly, exactly, exactly. And so if you, when you look back now, I mean, and you look at those experiences that you had as a child, do you see them as a curse, or do you see them as a blessing?
Not a curse, but not a blessing either. It just feel like it's like my soul's choice. It had to happen.
It had to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
see that's fate.
Yes, as fate, absolutely. I think you might, as you grow, you're still very young, I think. I think you might even come to see it as a blessing, in fact. Mostly these Sedna experiences, Sedna sends us these challenges which we have no choice over. They are a given, and we must transcend. We must, or perish, or go under, whatever it is. Those experiences are not good. That's why they're not pleasant. They're not enjoyable, and that's why at the unconscious level it's looking so dark and so on. But particularly as we get older, I have health issues and so on, which I have looked on as a curse in my younger years. But I now see more and more as a blessing. I've been very ill and had a lot of health issues in this last year when I've been working on the book. It's been a blessing. I wouldn't have been here doing it if I hadn't been here. And a lot that Sedna is always guiding us. It's like the judder bars in the middle of the road. When we're going down the road and we haven't quite seen, we're veering into the middle, and maybe we've got one of those strips with judder bars on it, and suddenly the wheels go and bounces us back. Oh, we've got to get back into the lane. And that's what the illnesses or the victimization or the da-da-da is. It's only if we persist and we don't, correct, the go back into the lane, that it becomes a real problem, and so on. And so, yes, frequently, once we're finished the Sedna Transcendence, I think you're probably still in your Sedna Transcendence. Maybe you're in the last few years of it, I have the feeling. But we can actually look back and say that was a horrible time. I wouldn't wish it on anyone else, but I'm glad I had it because it made me who I am today. And that is such an empowered person. And that's what I took from what you were, your feedback when you from the last interaction that we had, where you were saying you felt ever more empowered and safe within yourself, and you could feel the victim dynamic switching from within to become aware of your inner strength. And that only comes because of that experience that you've had. And so I think you're having it.
Yeah, that's definitely, I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I really applaud you for your work and for thank you for your openness and your ability to look at yourself and to grow and to sort of embrace. I mean, it's part of that on the spiritual path, accepting how bad things really are and starting from there. And we just don't do that most of the time. How are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. I've been into hospital twice in the last 2 days. How am I? I'm fine. I am fine. I'm healing. I'm getting much better. But we don't often analyse ourselves at a deep level, and I applaud anyone who does. And I can see you are growing with all you're doing. So has that brought us to the end, or do we have any time for any questions generally from anyone? Linda, how are we?
Yes, certainly. Any questions, anyone?
Hi, Alan. It's Carly here. Hi. Yeah, I just had a look at my chart and I noticed that Sedna is stationary, and I was just wondering how often it goes retrograde.
So it goes retrograde once a year. So for half the year it's direct, and for half the year it's retrograde. It's not really, it's a slowly moving cycle, but that's roughly how it is. I've been looking a bit at the retrogrades and the directs and so on as I've been looking at case studies, and I really looked through sort of hundreds of people and stuff. Not everyone with the retrogrades and directs and stuff. What I find, if there's Sedna moves so slowly that really her position is kind of constant in our charts. That's what makes her so powerful. Everything else is whizzing and changing place. Sedna's kind of in our lives is pretty much not, it's moved 30 degrees in my life. But I mean, so we've got much more of a handle on it from that point of view. But the stationaries and the directs, it does seem to be that possibly if Sedna relates to multiple lifetimes, that on the retrograde we'll be in a phase of delivering on some karmic promise that we made in a previous lifetime. So we're already on a path. This is why I call Sedna, called the book Sedna Consciousness, the path, the soul's path of destiny. Because the soul has a path of destiny, and we think of Saturn being our path of destiny in this life. And Sedna is the new esoteric outer limit. So it's the soul's path of destiny. And so if there are past lives and the soul travels over those lifetimes, then it incarnates to fulfill that path every time. And so it does seem to be, I have it retrograde, and I have had this work that I'm doing now is very fulfilling for me, and I have had a sense that this was the sort of work that I would eventually want to do. I wasn't quite sure that it would be this work, or astrology, or anything like that. But it's just that's so and I think I noticed with the sort of the Sedna direct people, they seem to be sort of forging a new sort of path and saying, hey, look, the world needs to look at this, and not sort of well, we all need to do this, which is kind of the retrograde. So I'm not sure about the stationaries. I guess maybe you're in between. You've probably done some work, not quite sure where you're going, and you're taking that as I'm standing in the dark here. So, it might be, I'm putting some meaning to it. What house is it in? Can you tell me that?
It's in my 12th house, all on its own there. Okay,
so 12th house I've done quite a lot of work on. House of the Unconscious, I've got two very close friends. I've got a daughter who's got in the 12th house. Seems to be, yes, very much in tune with sort of the joy of life, actually, at that level, once you can get there. But there could be a lot of distractions and sort of not being able to find your center. Might be sort of, you need to nurture your own pulse and your own center and your own sort of, and not be helping other people all the time, because you're probably helping other people all the time, or getting distracted by their problems or something like that. And that's valuable. And do keep doing that. I don't know. Do you do that? Are you into other people's problems?
Yes, I do. It's actually it's making a lot of sense as it's all alone in the 12th house there. I now feel that connection to that part of my life. So yes, thank you very much for today. I'll be looking into it. And you've got a book.
I've got a book. Go on the site, sednaconsciousness.com, and you can put in your email address. You can get a free copy of the book when it comes out. The book will be out in sort of March, I think, next year.
Wonderful.
Good.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay, Alan, thank you so much. That brings us to the end. Somebody's asking, just one moment, something in the chat box. Can you ask Alan before the end of the meeting, do we apply planetary disposition in case of Sedna? I guess
So
she means dispositor.
in terms of what planets, the rulers of the houses.
Yes, like Venus for Taurus.
Look, I haven't looked at it. Again, I've had to narrow my focus to get any sense. I've done a whole research over the aspects between Sedna and the 18 planets and dwarf planets now in existence. Sedna is a candidate dwarf planet, but there are 18 planets and dwarf planets. So I've got detailed aspect analysis of all of those, plus 4 of the centaurs, Phobos and Chiron and so on, and the 3 asteroids are left after one of them. And that's been a huge amount of work. It's been a huge amount of work. So I haven't really been, I've had to narrow that work. So I can't answer it. I can't answer it.
Okay, never mind. That's fine. We really loved your meeting. Thank you so much, Alan Clay.
All right,
And
thanks so
for
much,
bringing
guys.
us Sedna consciousness. It's great. And Alexandra says thank you. And so see you next time. And thanks from all of us. Would you all please thank Alan Clay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That was very interesting.
Looking forward
Thank
to your
you
book.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Alan.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome stuff. Thank you.